Good morning and welcome to Building Stronger Legal Foundations for Our Construction Future. I am one of the co-chairs today. My name is Ben Davidson. I'm a partner in the firm Corrs Chambers Westgarth here in Australia in the projects and construction team, doing mainly disputes work. I'm also the Vice Chair of SOCLA. And for those of you who are not aware, SOCLA is the Society of Construction Law. In this particular case, the Australian version. It's an international organisation that is interested in bringing together various construction professionals to discuss issues of policy and the law and related issues in respect of construction. I've got some great papers today which are going to be really relevant to an industry under enormous pressure as a result of a whole series of issues. So I'm really looking forward to hearing them and with my co-chair who can introduce himself.
Thank you, Ben. Matthew Bell's my name. I'm Associate Professor and Director of Studies for Construction Law at the University of Melbourne and a member of the Scientific Committee. So it's been my pleasure as a member of that committee to see the papers coming through and the abstracts and now to actually be in the position to see them presented. So we're not going to say much by way of introduction. There's some terrific things for you on Oxford abstracts. We're going to try and keep the presentations to, well, obviously less than 15 minutes, but if there is an opportunity for questions, we'll fit that in at the end of each 15-minute slot. So we're going to very much try to keep to time. But of course, if you've got any queries, you can pop them in the chat as well. We'll be keeping an eye on that as well. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Peter Wong. And Peter is going to be talking to a paper seeking equitable resolution for COVID-19 associated delay claims. Who should recover the loss and expenses? Very important question. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Ben. We are waiting for the PowerPoint to be shown on the screen. Yep, so I'm ready. Yeah, my co-author also is here, Sarah, Associate Professor Sarah Holsworth. I think it speaks for itself, you know, on the topic, and no matter what cities you are in, the pandemic has been impacting every single cities, and I don't think anywhere in this world have not experienced a certain extent of lockdown. And during this lockdown, indeed, it has different circumstances that we need to consider on its impact on the construction process, but construction is a project-based industry that it comes with a solid project period. So when COVID lockdown measures were put in place, sometimes it's very difficult to come with solutions in order to make sure that the project can be still completed on time. However, there are different treatments, you know, in terms of contracts that people can address these problems, and the project stakeholders can work together in order to find a solution. Under civil law jurisdictions, just like mainland China and also Indonesia, you'll find out that at the beginning of the COVID-19, the government deliberately sent some of the documents and make it into law and enforce it, you know, and applied it in the industry and said that COVID-19 should be treated as force majeure. Further on, based on the individual contract terms, force majeure implies that the client should grant the extension of time of the project. The effect of the extension of time is that the contractors would no longer be responsible for paying the liquidated damages if they couldn't really reach that deadline. It's what we called the date for completion. After this extended date, during the extended period, you would imagine that the contractors would also incur some of the additional costs. We called it loss and expenses. And under the civil law jurisdictions, their interpretation of force majeure-led extension of time would also entitle the contractors with the loss expenses, which will cover all the necessary cost for extending of the project itself or any other disruptions. There are still some of the gray areas that we need to look into. Even civil law jurisdictions would not really cover how the disruption of the supply chain or other delays that might cause the contractors additional costs can be compensated. But it's so much different with the common law jurisdictions under just like Australia, for the fact that under common law jurisdictions, we revert to the principles of a doctrine of frustration, rather than just we're giving express relief of the of force majeure for the event of COVID-19. We leave it to the contracting parties to really negotiate and also to discuss about whether force majeure would be the appropriate conditions to apply for, I won't use the word compensation, but for negotiating with a common ground to resolve the challenges they face together. So the use of the force majeure term in managing the delay claims due to COVID-19 lockdown can be very challenging under the common law jurisdictions, as you can imagine, because there is no clear definitions. So how the project stakeholders has been interpreting it is indeed comes of a huge topics and huge questions in the construction world, including in Australia. Some of the people, they will stress about the importance of the keeping everything, as it is, and we follow the doctrine of frustration, and the contracting parties would need to negotiate themselves on the outcome. But some of them insist that, we might, at that time, we might need to maybe make reference to what's happening under the civil law jurisdictions and do something in particular. Many of the contractors have been reportedly, we're having and facing some of the financial crisis, and some might likely to fall because they can't afford the effect of the long-term extension. So what's happening in Australia then? This study aims to explore how the contract provisions were applied, assessed delay claims arisen from the COVID lockdown, mainly in the Greater Melbourne region, and which includes also the enforceability of the contracts they signed. Of course, they signed the contract before COVID happened. So how could they really execute that, and analyze how the contracting parties negotiated the COVID lockdown related to the delay claims, and identified the needs of the contract terms amendment if it is needed, after the post-pandemic construction projects. I give you a sneak peek that is quite interesting on how the industry people have been thinking about amending contracts. It's very sensitive to them, not to me. So we have a semi-structured interviews conducted in the Greater Melbourne region, even though the sample size it's not that great, but I would say that during the pandemic it's not too bad. And also all these interviewees indeed are really responsible for the contract administration side of practice, and they are very experienced based on the demographics, and so it is a good start if we can still say that these studies can be extended into other areas in order to make it a more comprehensive results, but the results are still worth noting. But there is a point to note, just because of the small sample size, then all the interviewees indeed are executing a projects which are mainly using those of the Australian standard of contract rather than the JCT otherwise NEC contracts. And so I've tried to focus on the findings, how were the construction contract provisions being applied to the COVID-related delay claims. We can feel some of the rejections from the practitioners that I think it's mainly because they really don't know what the doctrine of frustration really is. Yes, and this is why they are really reluctant, to talk about the doctrine of frustrations and go strictly into defining what a government-imposed site closure or a government-imposed capacity reduction, which means that indeed, even for both parties, not only for the client but the contractors themselves, they really look into their very detailed definition about what government-imposed measure is. So for on top of those of the government-imposed closure, if the contractors close the site for other reasons, what they said other reasons, but still COVID related, including the disruptions of the supply chain and all others related matters, as long as it is not directly related to the government-imposed site closure, no extension of time will be given. And a little bit ironic that it looks like both contractors and developers are accepting this idea. Some of the contractors complain, about that they need to really suffer, they are really suffering with some of the financial challenges due to the disruptions of the supply chain, in particular by that time when it happened. If you still remember, in mainland China, many of the prefabricated units is still highly reliant on those of the very robust supply chain in mainland China, we have to admit. And but it seems like there is no, I would say, straightforward formula for the contracting parties to agree with any time extension given on that particular situation. The common ground they have is that if the lockdown is government-imposed stopped operations on site, extension of time would be given, no matter they will refer to the force majeure clause in the Australian standard. But if there are other non-government imposed delay, no extension of time will be given. So you may see what they say. I don't see the client would have paid for loss and expenses. Well, when we come down to loss and expenses on this page, they won't see the client would need to pay for loss and expenses caused by COVID, because COVID is not created by them. And the COVID is indeed, if there is any measures that would surpass the government orders of shutting down the site, they don't think the client would need to be responsible. And some comes with some of the kind of concerns, and I can't say remorseful, how would I describe it? Well, a little bit kind of wordings, into explaining about their decisions, which doesn't change. We can see the loss, but we can also see the way the contract worded. And so the contractor would have been entitled to loss and expenses only if the developer caused the delay, and COVID is not. So most of the interviewees described the negotiation for time-related claims as straightforward. So granting extension of time, some of them, if in case they even reject the ideas of giving extension of time for the disruptions of the supply chain, at some point they might also do this in the supplemental agreement. Yeah, some kind. Yeah, thank you. However, for loss and expenses, it looks like a no-go zone. So what we would suggest in the minute, well, for the time being, I think I need to wrap it up. So at certain time, the contractor thinks that while they follow the rules, on just accepting the extension of time loss of expenses, many of them thought that it is a one-off measure, because in the next time when they get on another project, they can factor in this risk into their tender price. And so in conclusion, the results reveals that the contractors parties are collaborating in mitigating the impact, okay, but in a particular circumstances that is quite straightforward, that it is government imposed, then they agree with that. Other than all these, then it's all up for the negotiation, and the contractors always think that it is a one-off matters, and this can be managed in future if they have chance to tender in the other projects. So for other details, you're most welcome to read my papers, and I will leave the time for questions from the audience, both in here and online. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I suppose you are curious.
I was. And
because of the question you asked. Basically, I understand your point of view very much, but considering COVID, JCT NEC, because this is presently a very intricate legal situation that is dragging the United Kingdom from contractors and clients. I'm of the view that liquidated and uncertain damages could equally be claimed by the clients, by the contract, loss. Extension of time is being claimed by contractors, while liquidated and uncertain damages, the opposite side, by the clients. If I were a client, considering the COVID period, I would also ask for liquidated and uncertain damages. How should contractors handle this if they find themselves in this situation?
Yes, there were one or two interviewees that also expressed the same views about the liquidated damages. But from the interviews itself, that the majority would think that under the current Australian standard, indeed, COVID can still be treated as, if it is even not force majeure, can also be treated as one of the events that would be valid for the extension of time. And if the extension of time is given, then the client need to forfeit the right for the liquidated damages. And also, as you're aware, also in the situations in the UK and also Europe, you will also find out that the government have also issued a lot of documents in order to encourage the industry to have better terms and think about the situations of the contractors in order to give a relief. And so the basic line for giving a relief is at least the client will forfeit the right to claim the liquidated damages. But if it's further just discussed on the contract terms, then yes, it can be up for the argument. But I think it's not lucky, but I do think it's I would say the goodwill of the industry that they try to prevent that happen, at least in Australia. Thank you.
I think with this paper, I have gained something from you this morning, because you also
that would be great.
To look into the area of financiers, project financiers, how they are going to compensate clients in projects. That would be a very good area to look at too.
Yeah, that would be great. And thanks for the suggestion. Yeah, we can discuss about this maybe during the coffee break, and I will hand it over to the chair. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for the question. It was really interesting. I'm going to hand over to Ben now to introduce our next speaker.
Our next speaker is Yuting Cheng, who is going to talk on to be or not to be, avoiding formulating the deal into the contract. So Yuting, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yuting Chen. It's my honor today to present our research paper. The title is To Be or Not to Be, Why Do Transaction Partners in Construction Industry Avoid Formulating Agreements into Contract Document? A bit of myself, I joined London South Bank Union as a lecturer in construction project management since January 2020. Before the presentation for the paper, I would like to start with a very simple question. So if you have ever met these scenarios I'm going to describe later, please raise your hand. Have you ever met in any project that the transaction partners, they have achieved this agreement verbally, but they choose not to put this into formal contract document on purpose? Oh yes. Oh, surprise! No, that it's more than I would expect. So this is exactly what we are going to do in this research paper. I'm going to introduce from research context to the conclusions and the limitations. The practical background of this study is that during one of our studies for the interviews in the other study, we figure out that the interviewees mentioned a few times that they choose not to put the agreement into a contract document on purpose. That is quite surprise for us and against at least against my common logic because they have spent a long time and the cost to achieve this agreement. What would happen in the future if any of the party breach the contract and they don't have the formal contract document? It's a disaster later, and putting it into contract mainly spend no cost compared to the long journey they have been through in order to achieve this agreement. So this is a practical background. We try to find out some explanations in the existing theory. So we start from the transaction cost theory. Transaction cost is the economic counterpart of the friction. And one of the very famous and behavior assumption in this theory is the bounded rationality. The definition of it is individuals are intendedly rational, but only limited so. That's why that the contract incompleteness is unavoidable and necessary, that they just can't stop that. The other theory is on incomplete contracts led by Oliver Hart, and he defined the contract in a very different way of the specific rights and the residual rights. And human beings are limited and not able to specify the sufficient details. And in addition, it would be overly costly to do so. And instead of mentioning that, he also emphasized the bounded writing or communication skills in terms of the contract incompleteness. And these two are very fundamental theory in explaining the contract incompleteness. And based on these two, both of these two theories pay attention to bounded rationality, but in a different way. The first one pay attention to the information asymmetry between these two transaction partners. However, this one is that more pay attention to between these two transaction partners and the third party, for example, the arbitrator. So there's no way the third party will get involved into the transaction in the beginning. Based on these two fundamental theories, there are a lot of empirical studies in contracting theories. It can be divided into 4 categories: contract as governance mechanism, contract structure, breach of contract, and contract renegotiation. So we have conducted a literature review, mainly based on the first 2 categories because it's more related to our study. The first one is contract as a governance and its interplay with relational governance. And the research can be divided into 2 categories as well. The first one is that they substitute to each other. One example, if you have a very high level trust, maybe it's not necessary to form a contract. This one is a complement to each other, the use of these two. And Cao and Lubner, they have conducted a very famous literature review in 2015. And they have discovered 3 factors generating all the differences for why they have these different conclusions. The second category of the contracting study is contract as a formal document and its structure. Researchers in this category has achieved very well agreement that there are 3 functions: control, coordination, and adaptation. The first one is to deal with the relational risk, to reduce the opportunistic behaviors and protect the specific investment. The second 2 is to reduce the performance risk. The third one is also, of course, to deal with the disturbance. So this is the existing theoretical background. But we have noticed that most of the study in these areas has taken it for granted that as long as they have achieved agreement, they will put it into a formal contract document. And most of the study will take the contract incompleteness as a reluctant, unavoidable result due to the objective constraints, for example, bounded rationality. Is it possible that it can also be a proactive decision after very careful subjective considerations. So that's why our research aim is to explore this phenomenon, whether it exists, and if it exists, why they choose to do so. So the three research questions. First one, does it exist? Second one, if it exists, how often will it happen? Third one is, of course, to explore the reasons behind it. In order to answer the three research questions, the first we use a questionnaire for answering the first two, and use the interview for the third one, because it's better to use interview to answer the why and how question. We have collected data in construction industry in China, because as you probably know, China has the imperfect institution background and the Guanxi culture. And also construction industry is among the most complex projects with very high uncertainty from the contract. This is the data collection process for the questionnaires. We have sent out 400 questionnaires and get 215 informant respondent to it. This is the characteristic of the respondent, and more than 80% of the respondent have more than 5 years working experience. So to make sure that the validity of the result. This is a process for the interviews. We have conducted interviews with 31 professions in the construction industry in China, and we guarantee that they all have the experience of not putting the agreement into a contract document on purpose. And all the interviews has been recorded and put into the transcriptions. This is the result of the questionnaire. So among the 215 questionnaires we have collected, 107 questionnaires, they have said that they have chosen to leave the achieved agreement out of the formal contract document on purpose. So which is really high. And it's also a surprise for me that to see many of you has seen this in real life, because when I was having the lectures back in the UK, mainly it's none in the classroom will raise their hand. So mainly half of the project, they have these scenarios in practice. And this is the result of the interviews for why they choose to do so. We have done the open coding, Excel coding, and selective coding. And the reasons for why has been divided into two categories. The first one is objective constraints. The second is subjective considerations. And we also divided it into three categories, which are relationship considerations, convenience considerations, and confidentiality considerations. I will discuss these 6 open coding one by one. Here, the first one is legal department doesn't know the agreement, show trust towards the other party, reduce potential risks for the other party, increase the possibility for the future collaborations, bypass the legal check, and prevent the technology from being copied by the third party. So I will discuss this one by one. The first one is the objective constraints. Even though we ask them, why do you do this on purpose? But you know this is not on purpose, but they still mention it in their answer. So we just put it here as objective constraints that for the big companies, the people who go in the first frontier negotiating the contract are different from the ones who draft the contract. So that's why that what they have achieved, in the negotiation process haven't been put into the formal contract. So this is the info. This shows that information asymmetry not only exists between the two parties or between the two parties and the third one, but it also inside one organization among different departments. So that has been ignored by the previous theoretical explanations. Relationship considerations, we have put shown trust towards the other party, reduce potential risk for the other party, and also increase the possibility for the future collaborations. And so our study is the same as those ones who have generated the conclusion. These two governance supplement to each other, and the reduce of the using the formal contract to also at least keep the trust level. So what we want to emphasize here that the opposite side of reducing the level of trust is not necessarily increasing it. It can be also that just just keep the current level without damaging it. So this is the this one is more interesting, at least in my opinion. It's the convenience considerations. It's bypass the legal check. I'm going to use one of the example mentioned by the interviewees. As a contractor, we sometimes have to build a small building for our client in order to get a very big mega project bid, and we can't write it into the contract document because it cannot bypass our legal department check. And that the clients understand the situation, then they agreed that, okay, they trust us. So that's why they put it outside the contract document. And I'm not talking about the chair or a table, it's a building we are talking about. So it's a surprise for us because it shows that between the client and the contractor, they have a higher level trust level compared to the different department within one organization. That's why it's quite a surprise for me that this is a convenience considerations. And the last one is confidentiality considerations, that it's especially more often when the transaction partners, they feel that the possibility of contract violation is quite high. And during some of the dispute resolution, they have to review the contract document. And in that case, they have to show that the technology details. So they don't want to the other party copy their technology details. That's why they choose not to put this part of agreement into the contract document. So this is the last one. The theoretical contribution of this paper is, first of all, we have identified a very often ignored phenomenon in the study, and also provide more insight of how the trust and contract governance interplay with each other. And also contract incompleteness is not necessarily only be the unavoidable result because of the objective constraints, but it can also be a proactive decision after very careful subjective considerations. And also information asymmetry not only exists between two transaction partners, between these two party and third party, it can also be within one organization between the different departments. Practical implications, that's why we name it the title, to be or not to be. Sometimes might be the case, no design could be the best design. And trust is important for the transactions in many different ways. Good communication is important for the contract drafting, especially between the different departments within one organization. This is a conclusion. So first of all, the phenomenon exists, and we have identified I just described these 5 subjective considerations for why they don't put it into contract document. And the one objective constraint is because of the lack of communication among different departments. This is the limitation for the study. First of all, we haven't really discovered that what kind of the contract agreement will be put out of the contract document. That's the first one. Second one is directly, actually what we are doing now is since they haven't put this agreement into a contract document, what will happen in the future if one party precede that the other party breach the agreement? I don't use the contract as there is no contract. What will happen after that? And what is the base they use to claim that the other party breached the agreement? The third one is that it's only in construction industry in China, so might be better that we also conduct it in other culture and the different contexts. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you for questions and welcome questions and connect. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, it works, finally. Yeah, well, a very interesting topics. Thank you. There has been a saying in at least in Australia's construction world that when you negotiate, well, sorry, not negotiate, you can start negotiate the contract terms with mainland Chinese company once after you sign the contract.
Oh, yeah. Very common.
Yeah, it is, but they try to take this as a joke. Feel sorry about that. But well, in your study, you mentioned about the importance of trust. And I just put my question very short, is that is it possible for contracting parties to place and trust on the contract terms that they will design? And is the situations really related to the power relationship on who designed the contract terms?
I'm not so sure whether I have understand the first one correctly about the trust one.
Yeah, well, people claim to just trust on each other, but is there any way that we can improve their trust on the contract terms they will, I would say, made with each other?
That's a good question. So in some of the scenario, in the factors we have discovered, it can be explained by power distance. But some of these ones, for example, the one that for the convenience consideration, that is the contractor. Normally we understand it should be the client has more power and they design the contract document. However, in this scenario, it is because the contractor proposed that. So it's from the one seems has less power. So I think how to be different for the different factors in terms of the influence of trust. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
One of the things I'm loving, Ben, everybody, is the way that you're bringing your excellent papers to life in this forum as well. So thank you, everybody. And it's going to continue now. We've got Arka Ghosh. Arka's joining us from Deakin University in sunny Geelong, just down the road from us here in Melbourne.
Thank you. All right, we'll get started. So hi, I'm Arka. I'm doing my final year, hopefully, of my PhD at Deakin University. So my area of research is basically digital construction. So here we'll look at a review of some cybersecurity challenges, especially in the field of digital construction. Oh yes, got it. So yeah, that's me. You can find me on Twitter. So here we see how the construction industry has slowly and gradually exploded in the field of digitalization. We see a growing dependence on data in smart materials, in smart building, VR, AR, drones, 3D printing, BIM, IoT, big data, AI, and smart asset management. So what all these digital technologies are doing is they are creating massive amounts of data. Data which needs to be organized, which needs to be protected, which needs to be controlled adequately. But unfortunately, the construction firms are yet to delve deeply into this issue. So we look at what are some of the benefits of digital technologies, what they have given to the construction sector. We get now very accurate real-time asset monitoring, which has overall improved the construction management efficiency, the energy efficiency, the cognitive buildings and smart infrastructure has led to better maintenance and management. Especially technologies like IoT, Internet of Things, they have boosted the modular and prefabricated construction. And there are technologies like blockchain, which has been used widely in material logistics through the use of RFID chips and the wearable sensors for smart worker safety. So the question, the various data security and privacy issues regarding adopting these digital techniques in construction projects are often overlooked by the companies and professionals. So we did a preliminary literature review on some of the critical cyber security threats to construction industries, especially in the context of industrial digital systems. So we found that there are numerous ones. We tried to categorize them into hardware threats, some of which were the transferring data and from using physical destruction, which were targeted by overloading of the system terminals and destruction of servers. There were some network attacks, especially denial of service using massive traffic. There were some abnormal operations using the distributed network protocol. There were some collision, jamming, fake location injection, and all this were given as some specific targets, like somewhere targeting on the hardware, somewhere on the service points, somewhere designed as malicious software, which infected the components and impaired the functionalities. And some more were some unauthorized access, data interception, virus, and one of the most common and most probably neglected one is email and external communication. Yes, you have heard of attacks like phishing attacks, social engineering attacks, clickbait attacks. So they were one of the most common and which has led to a lot of construction firms' data integrity being compromised. So we have proposed certain countermeasures to address these cybersecurity issues. So we look at mainly 5 topics. We'll first look at what are the existing standards and frameworks and guidelines which are present to manage data. Some organizational focus on data security. We'll look at certain process innovations. We'll look at data access and control in project environment. And finally, we'll look at the importance of cybersecurity training for construction professionals. So first, the standards, frameworks, and guidelines. So what's there? So the first one was the NIST cybersecurity framework, which was developed in 2018, which delineated the primary steps for cybersecurity and risk management for digital access across widespread industries without focusing on a specific industry. So that was one of its limitations because it was rather broad and generic in nature without specific focus on the construction sector. So next we came across the publicly available specification, the PAS, developed by British Standards Institute in 2015. So that actually provides a good framework ensuring the reliability and security of digitally built assets. But it was later on withdrawn when the new specification, which was the BSEN ISO 19650, came into into the industry. So that actually deals basically with BIM and the requirements and security issues and guidelines for BIM data management. Next, we look at some of the organizational focus on data security, which needs to be done. We need to protect the critical documents like bid submissions, construction cost, details, financial data, especially information from third-party agencies and sensitive information. They have to be prevented from unauthorized access. And also, there has to be a data security framework with a proper firewall against various cybersecurity threats. We'll look at certain process innovations, especially first we'll look at blockchain technology, data-driven cybersecurity, and probability-based model are found as one of the best approaches to address the existing cybersecurity threats in context of smart cities. Next, we'll look at integrated project delivery. It was found it was more vulnerable to cyber threats than the traditional design build approach. Then we found that we need to expand the existing BIM specifications to become more IoT compliant and enhance it to support the upcoming technologies like digital twins. We need particular regulations for that as well, not just BIM. And we found that using the adversarial machine learning, it was a good tool to act as effective security protocol against common cyber threats. So how do we control the data access and control, especially in a project environment in terms of a complex construction project? We need to establish, firstly, adequate data access and management hierarchy through a data management plan, which has to be done at the contractual stage itself. Then we need to ensure the information is disseminated on a need-to-know basis. Encryption is found as one of the very good countermeasures, which helps to impact the integrity of a network system. And we need to put measures like multi-factor authentication and compartmentalized databases and restricted access to non-essential personnel. So finally, we come to cybersecurity training. So we found that we have to ensure that users are aware, especially the workers who are working on the site using wearable sensors. Mostly they have to be aware of what their things are being monitored, and they have to be made aware of the threats they are exposed to, especially in the use of personal devices in the workplace, your own smartphones for accessing organizational data. They have to be properly made compliant for that. And also the cyber threats and cybersecurity training must be imparted as part of university curriculum to give some awareness to the upcoming individuals, and also the workshop sessions for construction personnel so that they are made aware of of these threats. So to conclude, we saw the growing reliance on digital devices and systems in the construction industry. We saw its advantages and also the cybersecurity threats they pose. We need to have a robust cybersecurity strategy, and we looked at some countermeasures to manage these cyber threats and issues. And finally, just the picture which shows the growing digitalization of the construction industry, but it has to be handled properly. Otherwise, it can cause a lot of harm. It has a potential to give a lot of monetary benefits, but as per Cisco's latest cybersecurity threat report, they have been reported that 53% of the attacks have a potential damage of above 50,000 USD. So that is a very big loss, and it has to be managed better. So thank you. That's me.
Oh, no, that was fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Now, I think our next paper is actually not here at the moment. So, smart contracts in infrastructure procurement? No? All right. Baba, you're up. So Baba Ali from the Melbourne University Faculty of Architecture, difficulties in information management for delay and disruption claims.
Hello, everyone. My name is Babar Ali. I am the PhD candidate at the University of Melbourne. This paper is from my PhD research. So this paper is about the investigation of difficulties in the information management for delay and disruption claims. So something about me, I'm basically a civil engineer by profession. I have worked in the construction industry in the capacity of contract administrator and planning engineer. So recently, when I was working in the capacity of contract administrator on one of the project in major infrastructure project in Sydney, I found out that there is a major issue in regards to the information management of the delay and disruption claims. Luckily, I got a chance to work on delay and disruption claims in that project. So by working with some legal professionals and different organizations, I found that there is some challenge that needs to be addressed, especially in terms of the information that we need to address the delay and disruption claims. So starting with the definition of a delay, as we know, it's like the time during which some part of the project has been extended or not performed due to unanticipated events. It can be caused by like unexpected site conditions, non-working weather, changes in design, variations. So those sort of things lead to delays in construction projects. Then moving ahead, we have another term called disruption that is intrinsically related with delays. And it is basically related to the loss of productivity and can also be caused by the similar kind of events that leads to delays in construction projects. So when a delay and disruption happens, we have this additional time and cost occurring in construction projects. Now the question arises, who should pay for this extra time and cost? And then how to compensate this loss? So the construction contracts provides us with an opportunity to go with the delay and disruption claims. This can be used to compensate. This can be used by the contractors to get the compensation for the time and cost loss during construction projects. Now, briefly explaining the process of this delay and disruption claims, it starts with the submission of the claim by the contractor for the compensation, which is then reviewed by the owner of the project or any of his representative, and then we have the decision for the entitlement by the owner. Now, this is a challenging process, the decision. There are some difficulties in relation to, in regards to the making the decision on like determination of the responsible party, that who actually is responsible for the delays and disruption in the project, whether it was because of the client fault or whether it was because of the contractor's fault. The next difficulty is, even if we determine that, look, okay, so we have this client who is actually responsible for the delay or disruption, then the next difficulty becomes that how much compensation should be given to the contractor, like how much impact that cause has on the contractor in terms of the time and cost. The next difficulty is relating to the agreement on the outcome. So if an outcome is, it's really the case that contractor is agreed with whatsoever has been given to him by the owner or its representative. So these difficulties eventually lead to the disagreements and disputes between contracting parties, and which are very detrimental in terms of the time, it takes during legal proceedings, and also in terms of the cost it has, like legal cost and other costs that the company bear. It's detrimental to both for the client and for the contractor in terms of this time and cost. All right, so talking about the significance of information now. So as I said that delay and disruption basically start with determination of the cause and impact, cause and effect. So the cause can be like because of an equipment issue, process, or any people issue like shortage of labor. So to determine that cause, we need information. And then again, to determine the impact of that cause, we again need the information that, okay, what was basically the impact of such for a cause of delays and disruption. So that is why information is very significant during delay and disruption claims. So looking into that, the aim of this research was to identify the difficulties in the collection, storage, access, and usage of information that we need for delay and disruption claims, and then to provide directions for its minimization. To achieve these aims, the objectives of this research were set as to identify the difficulties in the collection, storage, access, and use of information, and then to propose directions for minimizing the identified difficulties. So to achieve these objectives, we have conducted a systematic review of literature. Using PRISMA guidelines, we have used two very well recognized databases, Scopus and Web of Sciences, and we have shortlisted around 1185. And after going through them, we have screened the papers which are actually related to delay and disruption claims, and it gives us around 230 articles that we gone through to extract the problems in the information management of delay and disruption claims. To the results, so the difficulties in the collection of information that we extracted from the literature were the failure in detection of delays and disruptions, because the site people are so busy in doing the things that sometimes they miss the things that they have led to the delays and disruption on projects. Similarly, the time issue for documentation, because it is a mindset of normally it is a mindset of the construction workers who are on site that they are there to build the things, not for documentation. So they want to spend most of their time on building the things for which they are being paid. So that is why this is also a challenge in collecting the information that later on we may need for delay and disruption claims. Again, the poor paperwork. Sometimes the paperwork that is being done by the site personnel is actually not of the good quality that it can help us in delay and disruption claims. Then the work overload. There is so much going on the project. Then there's not sufficient time to spend on the documentation. Lack of human resources. So the lack of human resources is a problem that we don't have enough number of people to track the information that can help us in the claims later on. And then the next challenge is about the lack of focus towards the potential claim. Like normally they are busy, like the site personnel are busy in building things. Their focus is on getting the job done, achieving the milestones. There is less focus towards the claim because it may happen or may not happen. But if eventually it happens, then it becomes a real challenge for the parties to substantiate or to evaluate such claims. Then we have the challenge of lack of awareness of required information. It's like more related to contract related issue that the site personnel are not aware of what contractual information we need to continue with the delay that can help us later on in delay and disruption claims. And then there is a challenge of communication between the site team and office team in dissipating the information from site to offices so that that can be stored later and used later on for the delay and disruption claims. Now, there are also some difficulties in storage, including the ineffective record-keeping system with contracting parties, and some papers have also mentioned about no computerized documentation system, which I believe is not the case in developed countries nowadays, but it's been mentioned in the literature. Then there is, as one of the presenter also mentioned, about the verbal instructions is also a challenge. Like in the contract, you can only, as per the contract, you can only claim things which have been documented. So the problem is sometimes the client representative gives instructions to the contractor representative and they do the work, but not the documentation. So later on, it becomes a challenge to prove it that such instructions was being given. And then also there is a problem because there's so much of activities going on in the construction project, so the information becomes very big. So some information may not get stored. So that's also a challenge of excessive information on projects. In terms of accessing the information after it's stored, if it is stored properly, so the next challenge is about accessing it. So one of the challenge in accessing is about the construction staff and witnessing leaving the project. So as we know that construction projects are a temporary organization where people do their job and then move on to next job or to other companies. So at times when there is a delay and disruption claims and the information is not being stored properly, or let's say the information, so those people who are actually the eyewitness to such events, sometimes it becomes very difficult and challenging to get them back and get the information from their head that can be used for such claims. And it's time consuming as well. And sometimes it's causing companies a lot of money to get them on board again and to get that information. Then there's a challenge of time we're doing in retrieving the needed document. For instance, even if the information is recorded, in a way it's somewhere hidden in it's a lot of documentation. So you need to go through a lot of documentation to extract what is actually required for your claim, what actually caused it, and what was actually the impact of any delay and disruption. Then there's a challenge of inaccessibility. So what happens sometimes the information is stored, but it is stored on personal drives of people in their personal emails, so to which you don't have access to. So again, it's a challenge to access the personal drives and access the emails of personnel who are working on project throughout the project duration. So that is also a challenge in accessing the information that we need for delay and disruption claims. All right. So in terms of usage of information, there is again a big amount of difficulties, especially incomplete information. The information that is stored and that is collected and stored is actually sometimes incomplete. Like it is not enough for the purpose for which it needs to be. It can be used for the required purpose. Then there is a challenge of fear of disclosing information, especially from a contractor's point of view, because of some IP-related issue or because of the fear that it may goes against their favor. So there is also a fear in using the information that they have for the delay and disruption claims. Then there is a challenge or complexity in terms of the last stake of project documentation. So they have to, like, this goes especially to the people who are assessing the claim. So they have to go through lots of documentation to get the right amount of compensation and to decide who is actually causing the delay and disruption. And then sometimes the stored information is very in unorganized manner, like it's not very helpful to use. And then there is also a problem of multiple forms of records and inconsistent record keeping, because the record keeping sometimes vary from one person to another person, and there is no set policy. Sometimes in some companies there is no set policy for record keeping, so it again causes trouble in using the information for delay and disruption claims. And as I said earlier, there's also a challenge of multiple locations of records. The records are stored in so many locations that you need to go through each location and get the information. And if you miss certain location, there may be an important information which is being there, but you haven't accessed it and you haven't used it. So again, it's a challenge. And another issue is varied information sources. So what happens sometimes is like the client will have an information source telling something, and then the contractor will have an information source which is telling us something different story. So it's again a challenge to verify actually who is on the right side. And lastly is about the inaccurate information. So sometimes the information that is being put into the claims is inaccurate. And so the validation of that information is again a challenge for the contracting parties. Now, so to minimize these difficulties, we can use the concept of information management systems from information systems theory. So it has 5 different steps, including identification of information. So first, we need to identify what information we need for delay and disruption claims, such as site condition, resource information, progress-related information, weather, design-related information, material and payment-related information. So the first step should be to identify what information we need for delay and disruption claims. Then the next step in information management is to acquire that, to collect that information. So for this, nowadays we have we can use the technologies that are now being used in the construction industry. For instance, we can use some drones and cameras to capture that information. We can also use some RFIDs and IoT devices to capture the information that can help us later on in delay and disruption claims. We can use the weather sensors for getting the weather-related data. We can also use BIM for for getting the design related information, correspondence related information. And then we can also use blockchains, for instance, for payment related information to ensure transparency in the information that needs to be captured. And from there, and the next step in the information management framework or information management concept is to store it and organize and information organization, storage, and products. So for this, we can use some centralized cloud where we can use the big data analytics and machine learning over it to help us in analyzing that data, to do some analysis over the data to help us in the delay and disruption claim. And the next step in the information management framework is actually to access that information and then to use it. So the use for delay and disruption claims can be like, for instance, to developing some as-built schedules using that information that is stored in the cloud, to raise some contractual notices to prepare that claim, to evaluate it, and also later on to for dispute resolution in case if there is a dispute. So information will be stored in the cloud and can be used and accessed easily. And since it is a true information, so the user information again can be then stored into the cloud, and again we can perform some analytics and use some machine learning techniques over it to help us in this purpose. So as I said, this is something an ongoing research is from ongoing PhD research. So the next step is to validate these identified, because these one are from the literature. So the next step is to validate it from the industry experts and also add into it, because it's not all the difficulties. There are also some other difficulties that is being faced by the industry. So we are actually exploring those as well. And then subsequently, after identifying those difficulties, using that framework which I showed you in the last slide, we are developing an integrated system for information management of delay and disruption claims using these digital technologies as I showed you in the last slide. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's not really a question. It's just pointing you to a point for future research. While I'm trying to make a correction there. On claims, you said something about determining the cost or the sum for extension of time or for liquidating uncertain damages. Very often, this sum is already predetermined proratally by the QS or the estimator and inserted in the preliminary documents before the start of contracts. Thank you. Trying to check
Okay.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. More comments, less question. Can you go back to the PowerPoint of framework, please?
Yep.
The framework, yes, it's in here. Well, very interesting review, and we also noted about this, and I think this framework more or less is really close to what the industry has been thinking. But you need to think about also not only about the shortage of the information or just the loss of information, but whether the information are relevant. And the experience, another side of the industry experience is that many of the parties were bombarded by unnecessary information, irrelevant information. And I do think on your framework about the identifications of the information need, it's better for not just making assumptions about information loss, but also the relevance of the information. Second, it's about the techniques that you can use. I know that is your future directions. Yeah, and in this aspect, I would suggest you to maybe individually do some case studies rather than just put it in a lump, because people might not know how blockchain can enable this in particular. When blockchains have a very, different areas to look into that might not necessarily be related to the construction contract itself. So the parties might not really follow, even though they think the information is relevant. Thank you.
Thanks for the comments, but actually it's because it's like a conceptual framework, and in the next part we're going to link it with the required information. For instance, the blockchain, we will link it to the payments, and so an answer to the other questions about the need. So yeah, this is a very major difficulties that the parties are bombarded with so much information, and as you see in the challenges there, like as I said, too much information to be looked at. So that is where we say that first identify the information from the industry experts, and then work on it to get the required information. So thanks for the question. Thank you.
Well done, Baba and colleagues. I can see Vital's here as well, and thank you for the comments and the questions. Last call, I think, for the colleagues who are presenting the paper on application of smart contracts in infrastructure procurement. No. In that case, we're going to move to what is, I think, a pre-recorded presentation on forensic, it's actually a related topic, forensic delay analysis as evidence of transaction costs. Before we do that, though, I should foreshadow a couple of things. Of course, we've got our second session in this construction law related stream this afternoon, starting at 1:30. That's Melbourne time. Those of you who are dialing in, particularly from Europe and Africa, it will be, of course, the early, not so early hours of the morning for you. But if you do join us then, at the end of what will largely be pre-recorded sessions, then we're actually going to be awarding the paper or announcing the award for the paper in this stream, which has been judged to be the best. And I'm very pleased and grateful, Ben, as the Deputy Chair of the Australian Society of Construction Law, that the Society has sponsored that prize. So thank you very much for that. So if you want to know, and I'm sure there's people in the room who would like to know, if you would like to know which of the papers has been judged the best paper in this stream, be with us when that second session concludes at about 3:00 p.m. Melbourne time. So if there's any other questions from the room, no, good. Well, let's enjoy then the presentation on forensic delay analysis as evidence of transaction costs. And of course, you can ask questions in the chat if you're with us online, or we'll also have questions in the room as well. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you for your interest in our paper titled Forensic Delay Analysis as Evidence of Transaction Costs in Construction Projects. My name is Vasil Atanasov, and the result and argument presented in this paper are part of a wider study that is my PhD. The aim of this paper, as the title suggests, is to provide an indication as to potential reduction of time-consuming and resource-intensive processes related to delayed claims by using technology and contractual protocols. The main argument is set out in the context of the transaction cost theory. Here is an outline of the structure of this presentation, which follows roughly the structure of the paper. Cost and time overruns are common in construction. This is unsurprising, since it is a highly fragmented industry which requires the coordination of different entities, which means that projects have extensive supply chains, hence the multiplicity of individual deals or contracts in a typical project. In other words, the higher the fragmentation, the higher the number of contracts, the higher the potential for disputes. However, when time is overrun and claims turn into dispute, who bears the losses? There are general principles within contracts for delay damages, extension of time, called, among others, compensation events, an expression first used in the NEC forms of contracts. But contractual provisions are general and often cannot cope with complexities and uncertainties of individual cases. This caused attempts to create more explicit protocols, such as the Society of Construction Law Protocol in the UK and the American Association of Cost Engineering Practice Direction in the US, that attempt to tackle some of these complexities. However, these unsuccessful in terms of the improving of contractual certainty. So it comes to the point where claims and ultimately disputes arise between client and contractors, contractors and subcontractors, and contractors, designers, and so on. In an ideal world, these claims should be resolved by the administration of the contract, and there should be unequivocal evidence that backs up the position of the claimant. However, this is rarely the case, and the claims usually become disputes. Transaction cost economics is a branch of economics that serves as a useful lens through which to look at the problem. In the language of transaction cost economics, construction claims are unlikely to be resolved in situations of bounded rationality and information asymmetry, especially in situations of uncertainty which might be manipulated by one party or another, which is defined as opportunistic behavior. It has been previously argued that the current situation can be improved by making information accessible and transparent. Such a development could improve current issues of uncertainty and reduce opportunistic behavior. This situation is so common that it has created some £200 billion industry. One of the specialisms in this industry is referred to as forensic delay analysis. The literature is generally highly critical of the number of contractual disputes within the construction sector. In terms of TCE, it has been argued that the construction sector is noted for its high transaction costs. The view of construction practitioners regarding costs associated with consultancy services for delay claims is not dissimilar. This is certainly the case from the point of view of the forensic delay analyst. It is clear that managing and reducing such costs will be beneficial. However, as someone once said, you can't manage what you can't measure. The literature review established little evidence for measurement of transaction cost. On the other hand, there is an argument that extension of time disputes are fueled by information deficiency and asymmetry. The recent digital revolution has presented huge possibilities for the capture and use of project information. Information could be made available, accessible, and transparent, and by reducing uncertainty and hence opportunistic behavior, this could minimize these types of transaction costs. However, there has been a significant discussion about improving the efficiency of time-consuming and resource-intensive processes related to delay claims by using technology, and in the context of TCE, the work presented in this paper is about measuring the typical costs of forensic delay analysis with the view of exploring how information technology can reduce them. 12 case study projects were selected from an initial sample of 44. Here we are concerned with identifying the processes and resources currently required for analyzing delay disputes, categorizing them using TCE language, and aligning them with components of transaction costs as discussed above, and operationalizing and measuring these costs by examining data collected for those 12 project case studies. The selection of the cases was based on 4 criteria: dispute, recency, representativeness, and single FTA consultants. Those criteria are explained in further detail in the paper. The initial analysis revealed that forensic delay analysis process can be divided into the following 4 broad categories of activities, as illustrated on this slide, specifically on the top of the table. Category 1, preliminary tasks. Category 2, delay analysis. Category 3 was causation analysis. And category 4 was undifferentiated activities. The major point and the major finding is around about, well, on average, around about 70% of the time was spent on delay analysis, but this could be up to 90%. Specifically, the large proportion of this time was spent on validation of programs. So the largest chunk, on average from 70% to up to 90%, was spent on delay analysis, and the biggest chunk of this time was spent on validating programs. It is concluded that, as argued above, disputes can lead to significant transaction costs. Transaction cost economics theory can be invoked to relate those costs to things like information deficiency or asymmetry. The findings indicate that up to 90% of the forensic data analysis costs are expended in retrieving, validating, and processing project records for analysis. Where those records are incomplete, inferences are needed that themselves require further efforts to justify. It is therefore argued that such information could theoretically exist in accurate and verifiable formats. Advances in technology present an opportunity for accurate contemporaneous collection and processing of construction project data. The exploitation of information technology is likely to improve the current efficiency of resolution or avoidance of contractual disputes by reducing or even eliminating the factual arguments, particularly arguments relating to the actual progress of construction works. In summary, extension of time disputes can lead to significant transaction costs. This study indicates the measure or potential for reduction in transaction costs by automation. Specifically, up to 90% of forensic delay analysis costs are expended in retrieving, validating, and processing project records for analysis. The recommended next steps include to conduct a wider study to investigate the duplication of costs, as in-house commercial teams are also required to complete similar tasks to those completed by external consultants. Here is a selection of key references. For more references, please refer to the paper. I'm happy to address any questions now that you might have. Thank you.
Oh. And Vasil is online, I think. I can't see your camera being on, but oh, he's typing. Yes, indeed he is. So Vasil, thank you. Are there any questions in the room? I can't see any questions on the chat. Perhaps even Baba. It's a similar topic to yours, but any questions in the room, please? So we don't have any questions in the room. Vasil, I'm sorry, I don't know what time it must be for you. I think you're in England at the moment, so thank you so much for being with us. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to your presentation, and of course you've got another presentation coming up in an hour or so as well. Is there anything you wanted to add, either through the chat, which I can relay, or otherwise?
I'm not sure if you can hear me now, but...
Oh, we can. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for your time. That's all. I've enjoyed all the presentations. It's been a pleasure. It's 3 o'clock, 18 minutes in the UK.
Well, if we could give a special award for effort and commitment, I'm sure it would be on its way to you right now. Well, thank you, Vasil, and we're looking forward to your next presentation as well. And any other discussion in the room before we sign off? Well, on Ben's behalf, and if anything else you want to say, Ben? Well, on Ben's behalf and mine, thank you all so much for joining us, and wherever you're joining us here in Melbourne or around the world, or indeed watching this later on, it's been a very stimulating session here, and I'm very grateful to have been involved with it. And if you haven't read all of the papers yet, I hope this will give you a taster to go back and have a good read of them and interact with the authors. It's been fantastic. Well done, everybody. Thank you.